I'm Marvin Scott. Who am I? I'm actually the youngest of 5 kids. I grew up in the projects in Fort Pierce, Florida. And I like to talk about Fort Pierce. We say the city with no pity, but it's just something, most people, that if you know people from Fort Pierce, there's just a love that we have for the city. And other people, you might feel that same way about where you're from. It's not a lot to do there now, but I can remember the glory days of Fort Pierce and just growing up there. And I can just remember growing up in the projects. And one of the things, I didn't know how poor we were growing up. And it's just funny because I didn't know how poor he was because you're living in the projects and all the houses are the same. You know, you got two one-story houses together, then you got two-story houses that are connected together, and they're all the same color and everything like that. The only thing that separated me, I felt like sometimes, was the fact that growing up, I went to the orange grove. And, many people today, don't know what orange groves are because you don't really see them in Florida like we used to. But, going down 75 and 95, you're going down, you're going to see, back in the day, you see orange groves all over. And used to pick orange groves from sun up to sundown. I used to hate it. The saving grace was playing football. My mom allowed us to play sports, and my mom raised 5 kids by herself. I love my dad now, but my dad wasn't there. Now that's another story for later. But I can just remember the one thing my mom would do is allow me to play football, and I would go practice during the week, and then on the weekend we'll play a game. Now don't get it twisted. After the game was over, we still went to the Grove. But playing football, that was my little, we don't have to go to the Grove, but we would go to the Grove, and that's how I grew up, just going to the Orange Grove. That's how we made money. My mom, like I said, my mom was raising 5 kids, 4 boys and 1 girl. So, and my sister, she's the oldest, and I tell everybody about my sister Francine from the standpoint that growing up, she was to protect my sister Fran, maybe 5'2", if that. But man, if you mess with me, I would go tell my sister. I wouldn't tell my brother. And everybody knew if I'm going to tell Fran, it's going to be trouble. So I thank God for just my sister and my brothers that growing up. I had 2 brothers with sickle cell growing up. And so being the youngest and those 2 having sickle cell, a lot of times, in Fort Pierce, the hospital really couldn't do things for them. So when it got to a certain point, they would have to go to Gainesville, to the hospital in Gainesville. So there would be times when my sister would be left in charge at the house, and growing up in that, that type of environment, growing up in the projects like that. And it's funny because I can remember how old I was based off of where we were living, say on 16th Street, between 5 and 7. We stayed in 29th Street in Booker's Garden back in the day between 7 and 9. And then from 9 on up, we were on 23rd Street, where I grew up. So that's my home life, and I just grew up and just had, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You see it all living in the projects, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I came to FAMU back in 1985, going to pharmacy school. And again, when I started pharmacy school, I really didn't know what I was going to major in. I was in high school my senior year, and you can talk to many people who've had the same experience. I was doing well in school, but no one really talked to me about going to college or what you want to do. All I knew was I tell my mom, look, I am not staying here because I'm not picking no more oranges. She said to me, Marvin, you can pick, but you can't pick like your brother Ernest. I'm like, you don't understand. I don't want to pick like my brother Ernest. I want to get up out of here. So I told her I'm going to college or I'm going to the military. And wound up actually doing both. One of my high school teachers, one day she walked to me, she said, Marvin, what school you going to? I said, I don't know. She said, you're going to FAMU. And she said, what you gonna major? I said, I don't know. She said, you like math? I said, yes, ma'am. She asked me, you like science? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, you gonna major in pharmacy? And I said, yes, ma'am. And so the next day she had an application to help me fill out the application. That was my first experience to excellence with Karen. She really cared enough for me to say, hey, look, I'm not just gonna tell you to go to FAMU and fill out. No, I'm going to sit down with you and walk you through it because you don't have that. You didn't have that at home. And it's funny because I found out later on that I had several cousins that went to Tuskegee. And I'm like, no one ever said anything to me about going to school. So, but that was my experience. I came to FAMU, and honest to goodness, I believe that that was one of the best things that I could have ever done, is come to FAMU and you have the experience that I had, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you know. But just doing that in 1987, I wound up going to the Marine Corps, getting the reserves for the Marines. Did the Marines reserve basic training. I went to tank school. And in 1990, my unit got activated to go to the Gulf War. And in 91, we actually fought in Operation Desert Storm, where my tank was actually one of the tanks on the front line going into towards Kuwait. And so I have that experience of going to the war. And I came back. Things were a little bit more serious for me then. I had already been in school long enough. I had fun for me and a few other people. But finally, you know, things kind of triggered for me, and it was like, you know what, hey, I need to focus, and things were just a little bit more serious for me. But the thing is, being serious about things and still not knowing was still a problem in some areas. So I was more mature in some areas, and in some areas I wanted to be more mature, but I just did not know, you know. And so a lot of times people would tell you, you know, we're taught as coaches, as personal coaches, to tell people that the answer is within you. But sometimes we have to understand, because we haven't had those experiences, or we don't know we had that experience, we can say it's in you, but we really don't know. We still need someone to help us to find it, identify it, and pull it out. And so I thank God that He put people in my life that will help me to identify those things. I can remember getting ready to graduate from pharmacy school. And in my mind, the only type of house I knew was a project house. So I never thought that I could buy a house or have a house built. That was just my experience. Was I'm gonna get this is the house. It's a project house. And so by them talking to me, I was able to wait a minute. I can get this type of house. I can have a house built. And so my first house, I'm still in it today, but I had it built. You know, I looked in a magazine, found the plans, and actually had my house built. And still love my house, still love where I am. Now financially, I didn't have any understanding or any knowledge, and so there was some other issues that came into place. Yes, you're in a nice house, and you got the bills, and now you got the kids, and so those different things, you know, came into place, and so that kind of helped direct me to what I'm doing in business today. But I wouldn't change the process of what I had, because I had people in place not only to mentor me, but to father me, and that was so important. I needed people in my life not just to tell me you're right, and not just to say, hey, you know, go on, but to tell me, look, man, that ain't right. I hear what you're saying, but don't do that. You know that was wrong. And because now that I was able to help me identify my best self, you know, and really mature and grow up, and not just feel like, you know, I can continue to do what I want to do, and if it don't work, or if I did it wrong, or if I do X, Y, and Z and hurt someone, it's okay. No, you realize, you know what, it's not okay. You need to mature, you need to move on, and grow up. And so that's kind of, you know, my process of maturing as I go from growing up in Fort Pierce, being the youngest of 5. I'm really now, I realize I'm the youngest of 6, actually. My dad had a daughter before he married my mom. And so he had another sister, and I thank God for her, because I didn't meet her till I turned 40. When I was turning 40, around 40 years old, I met her for the first time, and my heart goes out to her, because she felt separated. She had other sisters, the siblings on her mom's side, but we were never really connected. So that was a part of her life that she felt like she did not have. And so my heart goes out to her as well, because my mom always made sure we grew up as family. So I've heard of my sister, but I never met her, you know. And so for me to now have met her and to have a relationship with her, and just going back to my dad, to have a relationship with my dad, because like I say, growing up, I knew my dad, but you know, we didn't really have that type of relationship. And I could remember getting ready to graduate from pharmacy school, and I was still upset, you know, because I just felt like my life might have been different if he would have been there. And I probably started feeling that way being in college, when you have all these people that are coming from certain types of families. Because, growing up in the projects, like I say, everybody was saying, so it was never an issue. It's different out here, and it's different out here because I was seeing different. And so I understand now how sometimes things are okay until we see something different. And that can be good or bad. And, so that helps me to understand because I'm married and I have 2 boys, and with that being said, with my 2 boys, I can see how they grew up in the house and things were one way. And so sometimes when they go out and they see people and see other kids doing X, Y, and Z, they see things that are different. That's the good and the bad. So sometimes you ask your kids, where did you get this from? Because you're not getting this from me, but they're getting it from somewhere else. And sometimes they're not satisfied with what they have because they see other kids somewhere. It's amazing how I grew up a certain way, grow up, I would just say poor, I see things rough now, but growing up then, it was just a way of life. And so you kind of get comfortable in that. And so it's funny because, so when I started coaching Part 1 football, I wanted to make sure that I coached kids that came from some area similar to where I was from. Not all the kids were from that area, but some of the kids were from similar areas, and I wanted to make sure that I would go and do those things. But it was funny because it was, those kids wanted the lifestyle that my boys had. But it's funny how sometimes you have kids who come from an environment where they have those things, and they want the experience that the kids who don't have. You follow what I'm saying? Does that make sense? And so sometimes I will see that it's like, where are you getting this from? Why is this happening? But then I understand because now I'm able to see from both sides. Both sides are longing to fit in. And so for me, that kind of helped me raise my boys in such a way where they would be mannerable, but it was important for me for them to understand what it's like on the other side. Not saying that you got to live that way. So if you're living that way, it's not because that's what I gave you, not what I brought to you, but it's because that's kind of where you want to go. But I always raise them up to be able to understand it and hang out with kids who come from different areas, because understand that could have been you, that was your dad. And so understand I want you to be loving, caring, and giving, because in my heart I'm loving, caring, and giving. So I learned how to do my best to love my wife and at the same time love my boys and make sure I give to them everything that they need, and then some of the things that they want, and the other things that they want, they have to work for to learn how to get it or live without it. So that's kind of with my boys and just coming up just through that particular part of my life with family. I got married 1995. I married Leslie. I was actually Leslie Black at that time. We got married. It's a funny story, and I always mess with her about it. So, and I always tell her, I would tell her, look, if you don't want to hear my side of the story, then you need to get the mic and tell your side of the story. So, but it was funny, when I got to a point in my life where, like I said, I came back from the war, things were a little different for me. So at this point in my life now, I'm looking to settle down. There's an old song, "Don't want to be a player no more." So really that was really ringing in me that I am looking to settle down. I'm looking for someone, and I thank God that He brought her in my life. From the standpoint too that a lot of things I do now in my personality, I don't know if a lot of people would take my be able to handle the personality that I have. Everything that glitters is not gold, and I don't think by no means that I'm perfect. And so again, I've learned how to be one way on the outside. I tell people this all the time. Really, I'm introverted. People say they don't believe that because I laugh, I joke, so forth and so on. But really, I like spending time, to myself sometimes. And so my personality is a little different. So when I go out, I give all this energy off, and then sometimes when I come home, I'm like, and I'm drained, and she has to deal with that side of me. So So I thank God for her, and then because of her, that's how I started going to church, and I actually, got saved that way. Because before that, I wasn't really going to church except for funerals. But for her, I started, going to church because of her, and I can remember when I first started working outside of just working at teaching and working pharmacy jobs, because I've always had a thing for managing money and dealing with numbers. I can remember growing up, out of my brothers and sisters, I was the one that knew how to save money. If you give me some money, I'm gonna save my money. The only reason I wouldn't have any money, because my brothers would find my money and then spend my money. But I've always knew how to manage money. And I can remember one day we had our oldest son Marvin, and we're at church, and they were looking for someone to work with the finance team. And I wanted to help, but I was like, I don't want anybody thinking that I want to help just because I want to mess with the money. So I didn't say anything. And so what happened was, we were at the end of service one day, they walked up to my wife and asked her if she'd mind helping working with the finance team and doing those different things. And so here it is, Sundays after church, I'll be holding the baby and she's working with the finance team. And so I can remember being provoked, and I was able to set up by God, but I was being provoked, and I said, I just said a prayer, and I just was having a conversation with God, and I said, God, I want to work too. I said, this ain't right. They got her working, and I'm sitting and holding the baby. And in my mind, as a man, if my wife is working, then I need to be working too. And I'm like, you got me. I'm sitting here holding the baby. I want to do something too. And from that point, it's like the journey began. It was funny because I can remember one day my wife saying, "Oh, so you co-director of the trustee board?" I'm like, "No, I'm not." And she was like, "Yes, you are." I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Yes, you are. It's on the back of the program right here." And I can remember going to Brother Poole at the end of the church and said, "Well," he said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to tell you about that." Yeah. And so from that point, I was co-director of the trustee board. I became executive director of the executive board. And so my leadership, those things begin to come out. I look at it like the Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. Sometimes you're being trained for something and you don't know you're being trained for it until you get to the place and now you have to do it. It's like, wait a minute, oh, this is how you do that. This is how you do that. So all of my life experiences kind of led me to where I am today when it comes to the business and things that I do. I do things and I work with people, not just as a business and not just as a way for me to make money, but I work with people because I care and I want to see them reach their full potential or reach their financial goal, or even if it's just moving up in their career, talking with them, and even if it's sometimes just conquering those personal things that's hindering them from doing some of the other things that they want to do. If it's the level of fear that's hindering them, helping them to conquer that because of where I come from and the things that I've experienced. And so my goal is to inspire people to move forward, to do those things that's in their heart that they really want to do. My goal is to coach them to cultivate those things that may be hidden in them that they didn't know were there. And then if I can, implant some things so that if it wasn't there, when you finish, we finish, whether I'm doing a group presentation and I'm doing a motivational speech, or I'm doing team leadership trainings and things like that, those things will come out so that I can sow something to you that's going to grow in you to be something great, that one day you'll look back and say that at that moment, that's when I got this. So those are the things, because at the end of the day, I know what it's like, to go through different phases of life, and I know what it's like to have people not care for you, but I also know the greatness that comes out of you when people do care for you. And so that's it. That's where I'm at.